Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Geo for Good Summit APAC Hour. My name is Devaja. I'm a program manager on the Google Earth Outreach team. I'm joining you today from Bangalore, India.
Hi everyone, my name is Yen Ping, and I'm joining all of you today from Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. My full-time job is actually with the Google Pay Partnerships Asia Pacific team, and I moonlight as a volunteer with Google Earth Outreach.
Today is our last day of talks at the Geo for Good 2021 Summit, and let me tell you, it has been such a pleasure meeting all of you. Our session today, the APAC Hour, is a special session for and by Geo for Good community members in APAC. We will catch you up on everything you missed from our social inclusion and crisis response talks earlier today, followed by a special thematic lightning talk from our speakers in APAC and a live Q&A. Yanping, did you get a chance to attend the social inclusion track last night?
Yes, it was so inspiring to hear Jackie's opening remarks. In the late 2000s, Jackie and her team helped put the Korogosho community in Kenya on the map for the first time. It reminded me so much of Rebecca's visit back in 2005 to help the Suri tribe of Brazil record stories of tribal elders in Google Earth. This marked the start of our indigenous mapping focus, which is now a core part of our mission. In recent years, we've also worked with indigenous communities in my home country, Malaysia, called the Orang Asal. An example of the mapping work we did with local grassroots NGOs can be found as a Voyager story on Google Earth under the title Orang Asal Indigenous Lands of Malaysia. That's not all. Today, we are also thrilled to share the work of our partners who share the same mission as you.
How cool, Yanping. I'm so excited. How is the Addressing with Plus Codes panel? Anything that our audience should know?
Yes, I think that session was such a good learning experience. For organizations who are interested in addressing projects, I highly recommend watching it. You can learn firsthand from our partners, Shelter Associates, and Plan Act on their experiences. I learned that addressing is not just about adding people onto the map. It's also actually about opening up access to services we take for granted. For example, an ambulance being able to find your home during an emergency, or even police trying to provide home assistance, and finally, getting access to basic facilities like postal delivery or opening a bank account. Informal settlement dwellers in many parts of the world struggle with getting access, and addressing can really help solve this. You can think of addressing as creating a legitimate identity for anyone who is unmapped.
Wow, addressing sounds like a time and resource intensive process. Can it be made easier?
Yes, definitely. Because without the right tools, you're right in pointing out that it can be a time intensive process. For example, one of our partners, Shelter Associates, they use tools like Google Earth and Plus Codes to make the process easier and more accurate. And then next, to scale adoption, you can also get the community to own the mapping process through either a train the trainer model or a volunteer network like what Plan Act did. I also really liked Shelter Associates' approach of holistic mapping. They used addressing to improve access to sanitation facilities by mapping where the toilets, manholes, sewage pipes are to help the government track the availability of such facilities in settlements.
Oh my God, this is so great to know. But how did they actually get the community to use the plus codes addresses?
Yes, so that's a really good question. Mobilization efforts are incredibly important to drive the success of any addressing projects. So, for example, creating addresses for the community is just the first step. What's more important is to educate the community on how to use plus codes and get them into the habit of using their plus code addresses for daily services. Similarly, authorities and also service providers, they also need to be educated as well. If any one of you would like to learn more about addressing with plus codes, please attend our session. So you want to address with plus codes? The session will give you a quick and efficient way to scale addressing via a free Android app that we have called Address Maker.
I'm so tempted to watch it now. Just a reminder for our audience that all of the talks you missed will be made available on demand soon after the summit ends on our summit website and on YouTube. What happened in the Indigenous Peoples and Local Communities panel, Yanping? I'm really curious to hear what you thought of it, given how closely you work with local communities.
Yeah, I think there was just so much to share from the panel. So, in that panel, we heard from partners across the world, all the way from Brazil to New Zealand, where they shared the challenges faced by Indigenous communities and the crucial role mapping plays in mitigating such challenges. From Indigenous community, like we also had sessions from like Indigenous community themselves, who shared about the impact of how these mapping projects help them address certain issues.
That's so exciting, Yanping. Are there any projects or examples that you want to share?
Yes, there's actually one particular project that I really liked. That was called the Trail of Tears Cycling Tour Project. The project took Indigenous youth back to their roots, or should I say routes. Participants actually cycled through the path documented in the members' journals across 7 states in the US. And I thought it was a great example of bringing the physical and digital worlds together to recreate a lived experience. The My Map is now serves as a living document for younger community members and outsiders, and for every year when the tour takes place. And other examples that were also mentioned in the panel on how they used mapping for was on, like, let's say, land management and preservation. They also used it for documentation of their shared heritage and culture. Also, some form of they also looked at preservation of indigenous mapping knowledge. And finally, the two things that they also use mapping for is to build spatial literacy among communities, and also finally visualizing the loss of any tribal estates and also the path to reclaiming lands.
Thank you, Yanping. I highly recommend watching the rest of the panel to learn more about the breadth of mapping for Indigenous communities. Do partners who start to plan to start working with local communities and Indigenous communities? Is there any advice from the panel that you'd like to share?
Yes, I think what I learned from them was, I think, three pieces of advice actually. So the first, it's about the community that you're working with. So whether it's getting blessings from the local elders before starting a project, or even thinking about the potential consequences of what you're trying to do, and documenting who owns the intellectual property rights of maps and data created. It's how Mocha in the panel who said, when you do this exercise with the community, you aren't an outsider. You become a part of the community itself, and the information you provide is trusted and valued, which is why you have to keep the community at the center of everything you do. So that's the first one. And then the second is actually you have to have a clearly defined purpose and outcome. So you should be very clear about why you're undertaking this mapping exercise and how it will benefit the local indigenous community, as this will also help the communities clearly understand the significance of your project and also be more involved in the process. And finally, I think like one of it is to make the process as collaborative as possible. Building the capacity of communities or even local authorities and officials on mapping tools is essential. As one of the panelists said, it's not an Aboriginal person looking over a surveyor's shoulder while they use Google Earth, but we also want the Indigenous people themselves to be involved and also empowered to conduct the whole mapping process on their own.
Okay, I don't know about you, but I'm feeling highly inspired listening to you.
I know, me too.
Okay, so inspiration is great, and that's what our community is here for. But are there also any practical skills that our partners can pick up, like what tools they can use for Indigenous mapping and how do they go about using them?
I'm very glad you asked that question. So we had the participatory mapping with Google Earth session, where Steve DeRoy he showed the method to interview community members and also to embed and analyze their data in Google Earth. There were some really nice examples by, for example, the University of Victoria students, and Steve also did a quick demo with his daughter.
Oh my god, that's so cute. Anything else that we should know about the social inclusion theme?
Yeah. We had also the disability and inclusion panel. We featured speakers from our travel and maps team. So the maps team is working really hard to ensure the core functions on maps work for people with disabilities so that we can provide a great navigation experience for everyone. In the last 3 years alone, the team has actually launched a couple of features with this purpose in mind. One was wheelchair accessibility for transit in 2018. Second was a very detailed voice guided walking direction that we launched in 2019. And finally, last year, we launched wheelchair accessible places. And most recently, actually, I almost forgot, is one that we did this year itself. So it was actually showing places with assisted listening so that it helps anyone who is therefore have hard of hearing. We also have an amazing community of 100 million local guides and organizations. For example, the Hearing Loss Association of America, and as well as Accessible Life. Both of them help us make places more accessible to everyone.
Oh my God, it truly takes a community to, support everyone and make some of our products and features more accessible. Before I forget, please also go watch the social inclusion lightning talks. From crowdsourcing places of sexual violence to the Share Plus Codes app, there's really so much more inspiration waiting for you.
Yep, that's right. I think we need to we have another piece to move on, which is on response. How did it go?
Thankfully, no disasters there. Okay, bad jokes aside, I really loved the crisis welcome remarks and keynote. Did you know that our crisis efforts started way back in 2005 during Hurricane Katrina when we made fresh imagery available for first responders and the public?
Oh, I wasn't aware of that. Now it all makes sense. No wonder we built a crisis team. And the crisis team, they actually make sure people who are impacted by crisis can easily find the information they need to stay safe. How was the keynote?
We had Brandon Williams from Eagle County present the use of Google Tools by their Emergency Operations Center. They've set up a really neat system of updating, managing, and disseminating timely crisis information, which, as you can imagine, is really important, especially in the case of a disaster. And he called it simple, mobile first, and interoperable, which I
Oh,
found
that's such
really
a
cool.
yeah, that's a really, really nice phrase. I think I will probably incorporate into my daily vocabulary now. Are there any other simple mobile first and interoperable tips that you learned from the other crisis sessions?
Yeah, I don't really know about that, but in the animating Wi-Fi data sensitive authentic session, I learned some pretty cool stuff. Christoph and Christian showed us how to visualize near real-time satellite and government data for
Mhm.
wildfires in Earth Engine. And it's not just wildfires, the tools and concepts can actually be applied to almost any other crisis or related application. The training will show you how you can use regular and geostationary satellite data as well as external data like official fire outlines generated by authorities. I also really loved the Crisis Lightning Talks, which featured partners working on wildfires and other crisis applications. I really liked the talk by Sam Samwater, who shared how humanitarian workers without GIS experience can use open data for crisis response, which is really important, I feel. And also the presentation by Katie Edge on their deep learning network research for early detection of wildfires using GOZAR time series. Another notable mention is the use of Google Earth Studio by Cedar to closely visualize and create videos of crisis affected areas, which goes to show, how powerful visualizations can also be in terms of um, getting the message across.
Wow, that's really a lot of useful information. I really hope everyone who's on this call, you really should catch up on all the various panels and sessions that we mentioned. I think it's about time that we should be sharing the limelight with our other partners. Shall we move on to
Absolutely.
hearing from our partners in APAC?
Let's get started.
Yes,
Okay.
let's go.
Thank you, Yanping. Okay, so our lightning talk speakers today will introduce how they're leveraging Google's mapping tools to map local slums and manage and respond to disasters like floods. We hope that these talks will inspire you to think of new ways that you can have an impact with mapping tools, or even provide operational or practical hints to improve and optimize your workflows. Okay, before we kick off the first presentation, I would like to call your attention to two things. First is the Q&A feature. If you're watching live, you can write your question to us in the Q&A section below this page. We will have an opportunity to answer all your questions for our speakers live during the Q&A section in the last 20 minutes of our session. If you have a specific question to any speaker, please identify which speaker you'd like to ask your question to when you post your question. Second is the link to Lightning Talk slides, which you can find below in the resources section. All right, let's begin. Okay, so our first speaker today is Kaninik Baradi. Kaninik is an engineer and strategic initiatives officer at the Urban Management Center. He is always exploring ways in which better management and technology can scaffold each other and build better cities. He is facilitating innovative technologies, intersectoral learning, and system strengthening across programs and geographies. Kaninik, over to you.
So today we are going to be talking primarily about our experiences from the Missile program, which we've been running since 2017. And the emphasis of this program was really in bringing communities and their local government together to help do some common decision making. And mapping is a really powerful tool for us to do that because it forms that foundational data layer on which a community and an urban local body or local government can really make some decisions and can negotiate and can understand each other's perspectives. And the way we operationalized this was in the form of settlement improvement plans, which were led by a committee of residents that we formed. And we gave them tools in the form of base maps and then collected data from them in the form of more notional maps that captured their problems and the interventions and their aspirations that they would like to see. And then we supported them in translating that into a clear vision document that then they were able to take to the local government and actually get some negotiations to start taking place. And Google mapping tools were actually really powerful for us to be able to do this because My Maps enabled us to very quickly generate and modify base maps and to collect information. And Google Forms helped us a lot with social mapping and social data collection. And then we used plus codes quite extensively to connect our data to the data collected by the urban local body and by the state and national governments to ensure that we are really all talking about the same piece of infrastructure or the same landmark. We also experimented a lot with Maps API, but that's a whole other talk. Based on the kind of data that we were collecting and the settlement improvement plans that were drafted, a lot of negotiation took place, and that led to action, very tangible action. There's a few stories that I can tell. One where a resident voluntarily demolished an encroachment that had taken place so that access was possible for solid waste collection in the settlement. There's many instances where the urban local body has made significant investment in the settlements using this data by either relaying new sewer lines or by refurbishing aging infrastructure or even introducing and adding new water connections or sewerage connections where they were really required. And so this translation of that data into action was something that we were able to really strongly see in the work that we were doing. So thanks. And you can reach out if you have any questions.
That was such an awesome talk. Oh my God. I have a question for you, Kaninik. You mentioned a few examples where the data led to positive outcomes, such as the local government using the data to refurbish sewer lines. Can you also share a challenge that you faced initially in turning data to action and how you overcame this?
So the biggest thing that you have to deal with here is a lack of trust on the data itself. And there's also a lot of lack of trust in the community. When you come to collect data with such granularity, the automatic assumption is that this is not going to be to their benefit. And so, in fact, the first year of the program was just building that trust on both ends from within the government and within the communities to participate in this process. And once that was there, it just is about persistence and staying with a thing that you believe in until action is taken.
Wow, I can imagine building trust is a long and a difficult process. Do you have any tips on what other organizations can do to build trust?
The biggest thing, the biggest innovation in what we did is the settlement committee as a platform, telling the residents that they are going to form a group and they are going to have a platform which is going to be regular, which is sustainable even without our presence, and which is connecting them to other decision makers. It makes them feel more active, and it gives them the confidence that if they disagree with you, they're able to push back and say, no, this is what we want. And being able to set that from day one is extremely important. It doesn't often work out with the kind of program timelines that we have to push against, but if that foundation is not there, then down the line there's going to be something else that comes up, which
Yeah.
defeats the purpose.
Wow, that's a really great idea. Thank you, Kaninik. Okay, our next speaker today is Alok Singh. Alok is a district informatics officer in Madhubani as a part of the National Informatics Center for the Government of India. He's been supporting the government to implement, develop, and execute central, state, and district level IT based solutions. He supports the Disaster Management Authority of Bihar through technology and by creating maps such as the one he's going to talk about today. Over to you, Alok.
Well, hi everybody. This is Alok Singh along with my teammate Aman Kumar, programmer. I am working as a DIO in NIC, Madhubani, Bihar. Here today we are representing uh, the work done by from our side for the disaster resource maps using the Google tools, or better to say using the Google Maps. We actually have made a map using the Google Maps for the disaster resource. Disaster resource means actually in our district sense, we are in an area which is flood affected, and the flood affected area means we actually face flood every year, almost every year. So to deal with it, we actually have made a map with so many important points like the in flood we have the shelter home, we have medical camps, we have transportation, we have boats. So we actually used all these things in our map and marked onto the same place so that the common villagers, administration and response team, everybody gets benefited in a quick manner, and they provide the response as quickly as possible. For the requirement, we actually have the selection of accurate places, facilities present to that place, transportation, longitude, latitude, and the most important thing is the contact details of that places, because the contact detail is the one thing that actually comes in our mind and we quickly dial to someone. So we actually incorporated contact details in each and every marking in each and every places as far as possible. Development of mask, actually the development took place with the help of stakeholders like villagers, panchayat level people, administration, state level people, technical people, non-technical people. Everybody actually given their input to make this map as resourceful as possible. End users, we had the end users in terms of local villagers, in terms of medical people, in terms of flood affected people, in terms of flood fighters. Everybody actually got benefited by the this tool that we have given to them with their contact numbers, with the distance, with the location, with the movement plan. Everything was actually a part of this map. Well, the output was an amazing one. It actually helped the common villagers in a very good manner, and they actually got the response in a very quick succession of time. These are some of the screenshots that you can see. We have so many markings, so many different resources. Well, the conclusion actually, you can say with the help of this tool, we actually have achieved what we are thinking of. And this actually, the tool has a sustainable tool. It will be used in the near future. It will be in coming days also. Thank you very much.
What a wonderful talk. Alok, I really wanted to ask you, what are some features that you would like to see in my maps that you think can help you make better disaster maps?
Well, I think the first feature that I would love to have is to draw the administrative boundary. And the
That's a great
second
one.
and the second one is obviously in the public view, if we can have some tools to measure distance from one place to another. If these two facilities are added, then I think it will be a great uh, resource or the tool to work with.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you so much. I think we have our product team listening. So we're sure that they're going to get the feedback that you're sharing. And thank you for helping us improve our products. Thank you, Alok. We'll bring you back in for the live Q&A at the end.
Thank you.
Okay, our next speaker today is Dr. Shiro. Dr. Shiro manages a space-based disaster operation program in JAXA. He has worked in JAXA since April 1998 and has researched space photovoltaics for spacecrafts for 18 years. He has also engaged in the Satellite Applications and Operations Center and manages disaster response and operation with space satellites. Let's hear from Shiro.
Welcome to Tsukuba Space Center. I'm Shiro Kawakita of JAXA. I'm in charge of disaster management with space satellites. I'm so excited to introduce our international cooperation program, Sentinel Asia. This is a space-based international cooperation for disaster management in Asia-Pacific region. Sentinel Asia is an international cooperation platform in which space community, data analysis support community, international community, and disaster management community collaborate on a voluntary basis to support disaster management activities in the Asian-Pacific region. For over a decade, we have responded to over 350 requests in the case of national disasters in the Asian-Pacific region. This is the test model of Aerospace satellite. The satellite had been operated for more than 5 years. It was used for emergency observations and provided satellite images to disaster management organizations. We have provided disaster management users with more than 1,000 damage maps created from satellite images for various types of natural disasters. The key to success is close collaboration with disaster management users. In order to achieve disaster risk reduction, it is very important to make a preparation before a disaster occurs. Now we are developing some applications with data on Google Earth Engine platform. I show you 2 examples. This gives you historical flood occurrence in your country. To reduce the damage by disaster, it is needed to recognize which areas are vulnerable to disaster. You can easily obtain the information of areas that have probably been flooded in the past. And this application shows the information on flood damage in a specific disaster. For example, a big typhoon hit Japan in 2019 and caused extensively many floods. By this application, we can obtain the information of flood map, flood area, and related important information. Google Earth Engine platform has tons of data and information. It is relatively easy to obtain the information needed. They provide awareness to us. Today, I introduce our international cooperation program, Sentinel Asia. If you are interested, please visit our website. Thank you for your interest and have a wonderful day.
Wow, I loved your museum, Shiro. So cool. You mentioned that Sentinel Asia has responded to over 350 requests of disaster management over the last decade. That's so impressive. Can you share some ways in which you feel disaster management has gotten better in that time span?
Yes, that's right. So, yeah, that's so good opportunity for me to support their disaster management activities, and yeah, that's very so exciting for me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And what has been like one highlight of your journey so far?
Oh, yeah, about in 2018, the big earthquake hit the Palu Island in Indonesia, and so they asked us to support, and that was the highest memories. So my activities in Central Asia.
Yeah, wow. Oh my God, that's so cool. Like I can't wait to hear more about it when we do our live Q&A. But thank you so much,
Yes, thank you.
Shiro, for joining us. We're so glad you could be here. Okay. So before going to the next speaker, I would like to remind you to submit your questions to all of our speakers in the Q&A section below. We will take all audience questions at the end of our session in about 15 minutes. So our next speaker, Kishore, could not join us today, unfortunately. But if you have any questions, his contact information is in the presentation slide. So feel free to reach out to him at the end. We're just giving him a quick introduction, and then we'll, of course, have his talk played for you to watch. Kishore works as an assistant engineer and does operation maintenance and GIS for the Chennai Metropolitan Water Supply Board. He's also currently an active research scholar at the Institute of Remote Sensing, Anna University. He's working on microclimate studies with special emphasis on disaster mitigation in urban and coastal cities for effective preparedness before any disaster. Over to hearing from Kishore's talk.
Hello everyone. Now we are going to say a most interesting and an important topic, mitigating and mapping flood disaster in cities. This is the current need of the hour. Floods are the most common type of natural disaster occurring throughout the globe. Every day, in some or other places, a natural event of flood is happening throughout the world. Floods in cities are more rapid and devastating than in the rural areas. The floods in the rural areas are going to impact the agricultural land and a minimum loss of life. But the floods in the urban area are more devastating since it has a huge impact on the life, property, and the daily day-to-day activities of the urban livelihood. That is the need of the hour, the flood mapping. Urban flood mapping are most important for effective mitigation, preparedness for the future, and also for the assessment of the damages which has happened due to these floods. The bottom two images on this slide, what we can see is the same place where it had happened in Chennai in the year 2005 and 2015, but the mitigation strategies have failed and the flood has happened in the same place again and again. To address these strategies, we will going to have an effective flood mapping, and with the help of Google Earth Engine and Google tools, it will be more effective, and that will be going to see in the next slides. This is a simple workflow of how we can extract from the basic of micro imagery and optical imagery and the derivation of flood mapping. This can be dealt very easily, and we will go directly what are the outputs of this methodology. Next, I have taken two cases of one in Kerala, Cochin, and another in Chennai. This is the sample study of Kerala 2016 floods, where we have the before flood event, after flood, and the processed, and finally the extracted flooded areas. This is based on the micro SAR imageries available in Sentinel-1, which can be easily processed through Google Earth Engine. And the second is the flooded area of the optical image, and the same data can be validated and used for the next flood mitigation strategies, which we can forecast for the next future years. And next is the flood zonation map of Chennai. This is based on the map generated based on the floods occurred in the 2015, and based on the floods, the areas has been zonated, and the flood occurring area has been divided into two zones, the severity zones and the moderate severity zones, and the other areas. And finally, we can have a micro level analysis of the flood area with the help of Google Earth Engine. We can have the input layers at the ward level, that is the sub-micro level. We can give the input, and finally, with the help of this input, we can derive the ward level impact. That is, with the minimum area, we can have the impact, how much amount of area it has affected, and what are the mitigation strategies which we can be put into, so that localized community will be helpful with the help of this analysis. Thank you.
Thank you. We're so glad to be able to hear from Kishore. What a wonderful application. Our final speaker for today is Akira Kodaka. Akira is a project assistant professor at Graduate School of System Design and Management, Keio University. He's engaged in interdisciplinary research to solve social issues related to disaster risk reduction using satellite technologies with systems engineering and design research approaches, mainly in Asian countries, as well as human resource development programs for Japanese elementary and junior high school students. Let's hear his talk.
Hi everyone, my name is Akira Kodaka from Keio University. So I'd like to share our application of GE for social good today. As we know that Thailand experienced a severe flood in 2011, and surprisingly, over 70% of total estimated damage happened in industrial sectors. In detail, factories in 7 large industrial complexes were inundated, and also Thailand plays an important role for the global supply chains, and that created indirect huge economic damage in all over the world. And also many of employees, they lost their jobs. So why this happens, challenging is that there are a variety and different types of stakeholders are working together in the industrial complex, but they were not knowing about what's really happening in the crisis situation. And that's why they have to make their own decision by collecting information by themselves. So that was a huge challenge. That's why we are coming up that using the GE to understand like how we can know that real operational situation of industrial estates, not collecting the information from each stakeholders, and not just only ordinary time, but also emergency time, how we can explain about what's really happening in the industrial area. And here's our research output. So we compare the atmospheric situation before and during the COVID-19, and we found that nitrogen dioxide and PM2.5 density have a co-relationship with activities of an industrial complex. And this is our first steps to understand what's really happening in the industrial complex. And we also started to talking with authorities who are managing industrial complex in Thailand that to sharing like how important visualized and scientific-based information sharing using as a common language for total optimized disaster response for the social good and industrial estates in Thailand. And we were also working as a university, so collaborating with Chulalongkorn University, one of the best universities in Thailand, having workshops together with the students, analyzing about impact of information sharing inside of the industrial park to reduce the risk of the disaster in industrial estates. Unfortunately, we could get the Best Paper Award at International Symposium of IEEE 2021. So this is all from our presentation, and we are very happy to have your feedbacks to our emails, and we are very much pleased that we have opportunity to work with the Google Earth Engine for our social good continuously. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Akira. We're so glad you could join us live. My question for you is, what lessons from your disaster research in Thailand do you think can be applied to similar research in the rest of the world?
Oh, thank you very much for the questions. So our research is just a starting point, but if we can quantitatively understand the activity of industrial park, then we can use that kind of indicator to determine the resilience of the industrial park. For example, when a disaster happens, the activity of industrial park declines, but at some points it recovers. And when we see how long does it take, if the shorter means the higher resilience that industrial park has. So we are willing to use this GE application to think about or to assess the resilience of the industrial park.
Oh my God, I can't wait for your follow-up research to come out. I'll be waiting for it. Thank you so much, Akira. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Devaja. And also thank you everyone for sharing all your really incredibly inspirational stories. I'd like to welcome everyone back onto the screen. So all of our panelists, Kaninik, Alok, Shiro, and Akira, for our live Q&A. Hi, everyone. So great news. We have some questions from the audience. The first one is actually for Shiro or Kawakita-san.
Okay.
Yeah, so the question is, in general, what kind of data do you often report? Is it optical data, SAR data, or NDWI?
Okay, thank you very much for asking me. That's a good question.
So recently, SAR data is more available or useful for disaster response. So examples, we can create flood maps with SAR data. But of, but of course, so optical data are so useful as well. And in the case of the earthquakes, so we can analyze and detect the damaged buildings or infrastructures by optical imageries. Okay, that's my answer. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you. I hope that was useful for our audience who asked the question. Um, we actually have another question, and this time I think it is for Akira-san.
Oh, yes.
Uh,
Okay.
yeah, so you mentioned that NO2 and PM 2.5 can be related to electricity and water usage. Is that
Yes.
correct? If
Yeah, it was.
yes, how do you think they are related?
Oh, yes. We also collected the statistical data from the industrial park and then use of electricity and also the water's usage. And that was also, and we conducted correlationship analysis using also numerical data we extracted from the GE. And that has really high correlationship with each other. And also we have backup interview with the industrial park people, and we kind of validated our research output.
Okay, sounds good. That's really interesting.
Yes,
Uh,
very interesting.
yeah. The next question I have is for Kaninik. So the question is on, were there any difficulties when you were trying to wire together my maps and plus codes?
Oh, quite a bit because the Google Forms, the way the data collection there works, there's no geographical link. And my maps is not something which is very convenient to hand out to surveyors. We need a lot more training to be able to do data collection. And so we actually had to invent our own intermediate kind of unique identifiers that we then use. And in with that respect, it was really useful for us to also carry physical maps with us in the field, where we had done a little bit of pre boundary drawing, and then putting intermediate codes on those, or putting plus codes on the physical map, and then using that to fill in the Google Forms so that the data could be merged later in the backend.
Oh, okay, I see. What was the unique identifier that you used?
It depended on the density of the region of the slum that we were looking at. So for most areas, what we did was we just numbered them from 1 to 100 if
Mm.
the number of households wasn't too high. If the number of households was high, or there was a lot of there were a lot of areas where people were stacked on top of each other, in that case, we did a combination of plus codes plus some additional identifier or some additional number marking that we could use to correlate them later.
Okay, got it. And while I still have you on, right, there's actually a second question for you, Kaninik, which is when new lines are built, do the local governments have a way to add them to your mapping tools?
The local government does not push their data back to the maps that we build. We, in fact, in many cases, gave our maps to the local government for areas where they did not have base maps themselves. And once we provided them with a base map, they incorporated that into their statutory or into whatever planning softwares they're using. And we would just resurvey the new line manually and involve the community in that process. So the community is maintaining a record of their own parallelly as per their understanding.
Oh, okay, that's good to know. Thank you so much. Another question now, and this time it's for Alok. So, Alok, did you run into scaling issues by putting all of the information on a single map?
Well, not that much because our actually the goal was for the common people, for the common villagers. So it was not all that difficult in that terms.
Okay. Okay, that's good to know that it was actually pretty easy for you. So back to Shiro again. So this is actually coming from the Google Earth Engine team. So the Earth Engine team, they would like to get your feedback about the Earth Engine apps. Were there any barriers to adopting the Earth Engine apps flow for distributing data and analysis to your users?
Oh, that's a good question. So Google Earth Engine applications is very useful for our members, requesters to understand their what they want.
and it's a relatively so for me easy to create an apps. And so yeah, thank you very much for regular sending teams for giving us good important and powerful tools. And thank you.
Okay, so do you have anything that you want to request from the Earth
Ah,
Engine team of adventure?
yeah, that's a good question. For example, so satellite images from Copernicus hubs, Sentinel 1 and Sentinel 2. So satellite data, it's usually so they can put these data so 2 or 3 days after they observe. And so every so just response needs a quick response. If possible, they can upload their data immediately after satellite observes. That's my request to
Okay,
any teams. Thank you very much.
it's your moment. It's your time to let our teams know what you want. Uh,
Thank you.
yeah, if you have anything more, we can continue, or otherwise, I can move on to the next question.
Mhm.
Okay. Next question is for Akira. Can you comment on how the platform adoption was different between industry stakeholders versus university students?
Oh, thank you very much. Great question. I think this is also mentioned by Kaninik about like the trust on the data. So university students are kind of like already used to use data, so they kind of know how to use and how the Google Earth Engine come up with. But my challenge applying the platform to the industrial estates is like how we transfer information or data to intelligence so that it really helps their operations for disaster risk reduction. That part I still actually don't have the answer. How do we incorporate our platform to their real operations? But it's like I believe that it's consistent the discussions and like meeting with the industrial people are the key to really use this platform to be used in the industrial people. And actually, this is also Shiro-san mentioned real-time data. They also wanted to use it for the quick decision making for the disaster risk reduction in the industrial area as well. So it's kind of request from me as well.
Okay, I guess it's definitely clear to our team that real-time data is definitely a P0 or rather a top ask. Actually, Akira, just to follow up on what you mentioned, right? So you mentioned, yeah, it is a bit harder to in terms of like how industry stakeholders would adopt it. Do you have an example of like how you managed to work around this? Like what has worked for you in getting them to adopt it in an easier manner?
Easier manner is so putting the first is easier way, like literacy, I think as well. But we show some hazard informations, some like forecast information, which is really like popular or similar, or like they are very much familiar with it. So we started simulating the flood inundation map, and then we just keep asking them during the workshop that. So if the flood is coming within 2 or 3 days, what are we gonna do for the business continuity management? And then we kind of created or we extract the needs from them, like what kind of information then they need additionally. It's like co-creation workshop. So we started with something very much easy or very much like vivid, like visualize the information first, and then dig into the detail to work with them using the data.
Oh, okay. So visualization is key.
It's a key.
Okay.
Also got common language. So yes, can I talk a little bit more?
Yeah, yeah, you can, for sure. I didn't want to cut you off. Sorry. Yeah, feel free to
So
continue.
industrial estates, interesting part is even it's inside of the industrial park, but there's so many variety of people, variety of the companies. They are not like working together sometimes. So they have their own languages. They have own their information sources. So visualizing the common hazard at a platform using Z is very much powerful to use as a common language within the different type of stakeholders. So yeah, that's
Okay.
I wanted to share. Yes.
That's a very good tip. Next one, I have a question, and actually this question comes from me. So it's also probably applicable to other people who might be listening to this session. So looking, and this is actually directed to every one of you, so all five, like all of you. So looking back at where you were when you first embarked on the project you shared, what is the advice that you would give to others today who are in the same position as you were years ago? And I think the reason why we ask this question is oftentimes like when you're trying to address like a real world problem or trying to do something that has not been done before, it can be quite intimidating and challenging. So if you have any tips, like what advice you have, like we're really happy to hear. Anyone who wants to jump in first, this is your stage. So like anyone, Akira, Kaninik, Shiro,
So,
or Alok.
so I think I think the thing that we really need to appreciate where we're standing today is how far the tools really have come. Because I mean, as much as there were challenges in terms of coordinating data and collecting it, I can also speak to a time 10 years ago when it would have been unthinkable, right? Or 15 years ago, where every organization that wanted to do a field survey was making a custom app to do it. Whereas now, at least we have confidence that if it's less than 100 questions, then we can do it on Google Forms, we can do it on Google Maps, and we can kind of move on and start working on the things we really want to work on at the community level or at the decision making level. And I think walking into anything, it's important to just believe it can be done and then find the tools to do it, rather than looking at the tools, seeing what the limitations are, and then convincing yourself if it's not going to happen with the technology we have now, it's not going to happen.
Okay, that's good to know. Anyone else? Would you like to share advice if someone was in the same position as you when you first started on your project? I feel like Shiro is thinking, and Shiro seems to have something that you might want to say.
Yes, I just remembered when I touched this kind of technology first. Yeah, just try. It's just my best advice for the beginners as well. So yeah, so Google Earth Engine is just a wonderful and powerful tools for us to understand the situations, especially. And if they are interested in the Google Earth Engine or other materials or tools, please try to create. That's my advice to everyone.
Okay, so it's almost like practice makes perfect.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, sounds good. What about Alok and Akira? Anything that you wanted to share with the audience?
Well, I think one more point I would like to add, that having heard the discussion, I think the technology or the tool which is easily accessible should be the main focus to work with, easily accessible to the common people, because there are variety of tools and many of the tools available, but these are the tools very commonly accessible and very well much known to the even the illiterate people also. In some of the part the literacy rate is quite down, but they know actually reaching from one point to another and to quickly jump from one to other place. I think that's the main, the easily accessible tools. I think that's the main thing. Otherwise, we have so many things to work over.
Okay,
So
sounds good. I think the common themes right now is one, technology has taken us really far today. And so anyone who feels like intimidated by the task shouldn't be, because we have all these tools available. And then second one is also practice makes perfect. Akira, do you have a third one you want to add?
Like
but
to enjoy using these tools, I think. Maybe similar to the Alok, like when I think about how to analyze, how to understand what's really happening in the industrial park, ideas are there. So we want to see maybe atmospheric composition, or maybe heat on the rooftop, or maybe water quality, or something like that. Like it's dependent on our idea, and then how we can utilize the tool. So also we conduct some workshops, like ideation workshop, how Google Earth Engine can help to understand the industrial park. So something like not just only tool, but think about our idea and then make this as a fun activities to go forward.
It's like turning into a nice learning experience or learning project based on something that you want to ask about, be inquisitive about. So we actually have a couple of questions. This one is actually coming from Kaninik, who is one of our panelists. He has a question for Akira-san. So the question is, when you're working with the industry, was there any association or other organizations that helped you connect to them?
Oh yeah, thank you for the question. Yes, we had a partner. So in Thailand, we worked with the Industrial Estate of Thailand, so which is a public organization to manage the industrial estates. So we try to contact with them and then connect to the tenant companies. Yeah, so we kind of go to the top-down manner in Thailand.
Okay, Kaninik, do you have like a follow-up question you want to ask Akira?
Actually, yeah, it's because the industrial estate thing reminded me of another project that we did where we were working with the industrial estates around Gujarat and we were helping them work on sanitation rather than pollution. And one of the huge challenges we also had is in terms of willingness to share the data because they
Yes.
automatically see us as an adversary. In our case, it was easier because the estate was mandating them to do it. In your case, how did you convince them to trust you, like on a one-to-one basis?
Thank you very much. That's actually we're still facing with. So there's so many confidential data they cannot expose, they cannot share with us because it's very much sensitive data. So we're trying to understand so what is the interdependency among the stakeholders, not just only sharing the information. So example, the company want to start the operation, but if the infrastructure is not operating yet, so there's a dependency. So something like we try to understand what kind of resources that they are depending on which organization. So to understand that, then we started to activate a discussion. So which part that they can help during disaster, maybe providing information or providing resources, so that we create to kind of unit a platform to tackle with a common disaster in industrial estates. But it's still challenging. So I'd like to share the output with you too.
Okay, thank you, Akira. Thank you, Kaninik. We have another audience question. It's again actually back to Akira. So it's again bouncing off the discussion on working with industry stakeholders. So since you want to build a community, some of the stakeholders in the industrial complex will not be keen to share activity information. Oh, okay, and then how did you manage to do it? So I think actually it's kind of tied to what Kaninik had just asked and that you also have explained. But if you have anything more that you want to add, yeah, it's your stage.
Oh yeah, thank you very much. And also, yes, sharing the information is a key. So Google Earth Engine also can be used, but not just only to extract the information from them, but we also try to understand what kind of information that they really need other than the hazard data. For example, road network data. So maybe when we think about the sustainable employees, maybe we also need to share the information about vulnerability of the people living near there, because these local people are also employees of the industrial estates. So we also provide some vulnerability information to them so that they can use at the same time. So not just only to extract them information, but also what kind of information that we can provide from ourselves. And then we merged it to have the better decision making for each stakeholder in the industrial estate. That's what we are now been trying.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, thank you so much, everyone, for all of your really thoughtful answers and for being here with us today. We also would like to thank our audience for joining today's session, and to all of those who asked us questions. Really appreciate all of your questions and all of your participation. We hope this session was really helpful to you. And if you'd like to learn and find out more, please join us for the virtual meetups and office hours that we have starting today at 1 a.m. US Pacific time. You can find out more on our main site. And wishing everyone the best of luck. Have a good rest of the summit.